Good morning. Now we can start the day. That's better. Morning, guys. Thank you so much again, because the comments and the questions have just carried on coming overnight. So many, I mean, still way too many to ever fit into a video, but thank you very much, some great ones. Let's try and crack on then. I'll start with some of the ones that came through from YouTube. Let's start with... There's a guy across the road who's obviously using a chainsaw or something. I hope you can still hear me all right, but it's bloody noisy. Right, okay, let's start with this one from lots of you. And I'm sorry I can't name check individuals, but so many people obviously asking about the McLaren situation and this so-called Fredo gate. Now, first of all, the whole Fredo thing is ridiculous, and I'm not going to give that too much time, because it's that's just a joke that somebody in the media has picked up on that as being a major story. But it is symptomatic of what's going on at McLaren. It's symptomatic of a larger problem there, and that, you know, this story that from a disgruntled employee that the staff, the workforce are not happy. Of course they're not happy. You know, nobody at McLaren will be happy and should be happy. Even the management, you know, should not be happy right now. So a story that says McLaren staff are not happy is not a story. When the results have been as poor as they've been for so long, of course they're not going to be happy. What's you know, the crux of all this is it's not just about the results. I've said this time and time again. When results are not going your way in a Formula One team, it generally just translates into more and more hard work for the staff, because you know, you feel like you've got to dig deeper, you've got to work harder to try and get yourself out of the situation. You've at least got to be seen to be appearing to work harder and trying to get yourself out of the situation. And you can work twice as hard, twice as long, twice as fast, and yet still not get the results. And that's what's happening at McLaren. You need leadership, and you need to look up to somebody who's going to direct you out of the hole that you're in. In a Formula One team, you look up to your senior management, you look up to the team principal, you look up to your drivers for answers. You want them to tell you what the solution is to the problem. The problem at McLaren is that nobody, not even the management, not even the technical team, seem to have answers for the route out of this problem, and that's what hurts most. They had a team briefing, one of the collective gatherings that they have just outside the race bays in the factory after every Grand Prix, where, you know, a member of the senior team generally comes along and gives an update as to what happened over the weekend to all the workforce at the company. And when they did that after Canada, after a disappointing race, they had no answers. So when you've got no leadership being able to lead you out of the hole, and I've no doubt that the leadership at McLaren are doing their best, but they're struggling because they cannot work out what the problem is. I don't know why they can't work out what the problem is. I don't know enough detail about it, but you need somebody, you need leadership to look up to, and you know, that can come from the drivers as well. And when you see someone like Fernando, or hear Fernando Alonso with the comments that he made in the car on Sunday, I'm sure that Fernando's as frustrated as any other member of that McLaren organisation, but he's got a responsibility to not show that, to not let the rest of his team, you know, who are looking up to him, listen and hear those kind of comments, because all it does is breed negativity. I've been there, believe me, I've been there myself. 2007, great example, both of our drivers fighting each other, and you cannot help but have that disseminate through the organisation. So the leadership from the senior team and the drivers, and each leader all the way through the organisation, needs to step up right now, needs to take responsibility, needs to find some way collectively of showing positivity, whether that is through Fredo bars or through financial bonuses or just a big pat on the back. It doesn't really matter. You know, that's not the point. The point is they need to find a clear path back to some sort of success, and at the moment they haven't got one. So I'm not surprised it's a grumpy workforce, and I'm not surprised that after all this time of being a grumpy workforce, it's finally kind of breached into the media circle. So I hope that addresses to some extent lots of you asking about the McLaren situation. It's a horrible situation for them to be in. I feel for them massively, and I just desperately hope that they can find something that will help them turn the corner very, very soon. Okay, this is a good one. Jorgen Salij, I hope I've got that right. Apologies if I haven't. Great and informative video, thank you. Would like to ask a question about tyres. How do tyres work logistically and financially? Do teams buy all 13 sets of tyres, or do they only buy the sets they actually use? And do they get a return for giving the used sets back to Pirelli? Right, well, no. What happens is with a common supplier, like the tyre supplier, similarly with an engine supplier and all your major partners, you agree and sign a contract at the start of a season. And that contract has a financial figure in it which you pay for your tyres for the season. So Pirelli will have a number that they give to all the teams. This is what it's going to cost for you to be a Pirelli partner for the season. Of course, they have no choice but to take it if they want to sign up to Formula One. And that's how it goes. Audi guy Paul says, on a previous video, and I think I did this last week, he says, you spoke about the 100Ks a year filming allowance that teams get. His question is, how is that policed? Who checks that they're not sneaking out and testing outside the rules? Which is a good question. And it's policed, of course, now in this modern era, digitally through data. So the FIA have a data recorder on every car, sealed, and every time a car is fired up or switched on or turns a wheel, that data is recorded. And of course, you've also got to appreciate it would be very difficult for a Formula One team to go and test in absolute secrecy these days without anybody knowing about it. So it would be very, very hard to fire up a Formula One car and run it round without anybody realising it's happening. So the point is that it doesn't really need to be policed that well, but the FIA have access to all of the onboard data from every single car. The car can't run without that data logger on board, and therefore they have access to any time a car is used for any reason. Ruby Bird says, at the French Grand Prix, first of all, Aquafresh missed a massive opportunity to advertise their toothpaste at the French Grand Prix. Very good point. Yes, they did. I actually thought that when I was watching the TV. Was there a technical reason for painting the stripes around the track? I'm sure many of you will know this already, but those stripes around the edge of the racetrack at Paul Ricard are different levels of abrasion. So the blue stripes and the red stripes are different levels of abrasive paint that is put around the edge of that racetrack. The idea being that if a car is sliding off, spinning off the racetrack, heading for the barriers, the levels of abrasiveness increase the nearer you get to the barriers. So the idea is that it slows the car down, slows a sliding car down before it ever makes contact with the barriers. Sabu P. Ptolemy, sorry if I got it wrong again, pronunciation of the name. Mark, I hope you're excited that Ferrari might just be going against convention and put Charles Leclerc in Kimi's seat next year. The kid is the real deal. The kid is absolutely the real deal, and I, along with most people in Formula One, would love to see Charles Leclerc inside that Ferrari seat next season. I think for the first time, talking to lots of people within the paddock, there is a glimmer of hope that actually that could well happen. Ferrari are taking a very serious look at him. He's obviously performing incredibly well right now, and I think actually there's a very high chance we'll see him in a Ferrari, which does break Ferrari's kind of convention of not putting young kids in the car. But hey, I mean, wouldn't it be great? I'd love to see that. Right, somebody called Build Motocicletistis says, a few of the drivers had attempted to get fastest lap later in the race, but it went to Valtteri Bottas on lap 41 by almost 3/10. As his car was damaged, please explain how he managed fastest lap by such a sizable chunk. It's a good question. Sometimes you have to appreciate that when you get some damage onto your car, it can have an effect. Like with Valtteri's car, it had an effect of losing some rear downforce on the car. Quite a sizable chunk of rear downforce. That doesn't always mean that you will do a slower lap. What it can mean is that it makes it much harder to protect your rear tyres, for example, to look after them over the course of a stint in the race. That's what happened to Valtteri. So over a race distance, he's having to drive in a much more conservative fashion to protect his rear tyres, to make them last for the length of that stint. But to go for an all-out fastest lap, sometimes the overall downforce level doesn't necessarily hinder you in that sense. So, for example, in qualifying, if you were setting up your car specifically for qualifying without any thought on the race, you'd have a very different, aero setup on the car to the one you would have for the race. The rules, of course, state that whatever you go into Saturday with in terms of setup or Saturday afternoon, Your car's then in parc fermé, and you can't then change too much in terms of your setup before you start the race. So you've always got to have, you know, a bit of a thought on what's coming on Sunday. So to answer the question, he should have been able to do fastest lap because his car was he still got the quickest car. Don't forget, the Mercedes was the quickest car in France on Sunday afternoon. So he had the fastest car. He had a lower level of downforce, which on that occasion, for that one lap, will have given him the ability to do an absolute fastest lap. It just will have cost him over the course of a race in terms of protecting and looking after tyres, which meant that he couldn't push to that level lap after lap after lap. Hope that explains it. Foss9 says that the pundits expecting excitement in Canada and a boring race in France have me worried that no one involved actually knows what we need to have good racing. Well, I know it can look like that. You know, Formula One is not an exact science, much as everyone would love it to be. And one of the biggest things that affects that is the relationship with tyres to the track surface. And you can like or love that that's a big factor in Formula One. I think, you know, lots of people hate it. Lots of people don't like talking about tyres. I find it interesting because it's, you know, it's part of that technical side of the sport that I really love to try and understand. But even the teams, you know, will have got to France, a brand new track, a brand new surface, temperatures that they were just unable to predict in advance, and, you know, not have a very clear picture of exactly how the order was going to shake up. I think we knew that Mercedes was going to be quick, was going to be dominant. Thought the track would lend itself to pretty good racing. I knew it had overtaking opportunities. The strategy side of it, where it was a one-stop race, you know, that definitely can lead to dull races, because strategy is one of the things that can really spice things up. And what that does is when you get multiple stops or incidents like we had on the first lap in France, you get cars out of position on the racetrack. And when a car's out of position, particularly like a fast car like Vettel and Bottas towards the back on Sunday, they've got to fight their way through the field, which means you get overtaking. So that's one of the reasons that Sunday ended up being a bit more exciting. But also when you have a two-stop or a multiple-stop race, the same thing happens. You've got many stops happening. When you make a stop, it can feed you back in further down the order, and the faster cars then need to fight their way back to the front. I think the unpredictability, first of all, is a great thing. The reason it's coming about, I think, is partly because of the tyres. As I say, these tyres are so temperature sensitive. They're so surface sensitive in terms of abrasion levels, temperature levels as well. And no one really, until you get to a track, can predict exactly what that's going to be like, particularly at a circuit like France that we've never been to before with a brand new track surface. So that's the reason that even the experts sometimes get it wrong. And by the experts, I mean the pundits, I also mean the teams. It's very, very difficult to predict what temperatures and the conditions will be like and how that will impact on the performance levels of each car, because it does have an impact, has a significant impact, perhaps more of an impact than it should have. But I think that's the reason. Right, last couple. iCrish46 says, the pit entry right near the Mercedes pit crew and the pit exit on the racing line are unsafe for drivers and pit crews. Won't the FIA ask the Ricard circuit to modify at least for 2019? Actually, I think they probably will. I actually agree with you there. I think certainly the exiting on the racing line part of the track can be dangerous. We saw a couple of incidents in the race where drivers who were flat out down that start-finish straight, heading towards the braking zone for turn one, were pretty much on exactly the same line as cars coming out of the pit exit. You do, as a driver exiting the pits, get a blue flashing light to say that there are cars, faster cars coming past you as you come onto the circuit. But, I mean, as a racing driver, you're not going to do anything else other than put your foot flat to the floor as soon as you cross that pit exit line. So, you know, you've got one car coming out as fast as he can onto the racetrack, another guy who's pulling over to that right-hand side to try and get himself into position for the braking zone. And yes, we could have an incident. So I think that's unsafe. I think we should be looking to try and see if there's anything we can do about it. It's not easy, I have to say, to always get the pit exit onto a part of the circuit where it's not going to interfere with the racing. It's sometimes not a quick fix, but I think if they're not already, they should be looking at it. I suspect they probably will. In terms of the pit entry, it was very close. It was a short run into the Mercedes pit stop area, and that means that drivers who came in and perhaps got out of control crossing the pit entry line could come very close to the Mercedes pit. I think that was less of an issue, but I absolutely think, as they always do, the FIA and Formula One will go back. They'll have a debrief after every race, and they will look at any potential changes they can make. The traffic situation, of course, at Paul Ricard has to be one of those. It was a disaster in terms of allowing fans into the circuit. I so feel for the guys who missed out and were stuck in traffic for so long. It's unacceptable. It's not like the race crept up on anybody and was a surprise. They planned it for ages and they just got it wrong. And I think the way that it was dealt with over the weekend leaves a bit to be answered as well. And I think personally that fans have some right to start questioning now, as to questioning, you know, whether they want refunds or how they do it, I don't know, but they need to get together. I think it's happening. They need some answers from Formula One and from the French GP organisers as to why they weren't able to get into in and out of the circuit easily, having paid so much money for a Grand Prix ticket. So they will look at everything after a race, they will go back, they'll make notes, they'll debrief, and they will, I'm sure, look at making improvements in whatever areas they need for next season's race. Okay, final one. Stuart North. He says, would Max have been allowed to keep the lead if he jumped Hamilton through that first corner incident in France, because it looked close? Right, well, Max had to avoid the Valtteri Bottas-Sebastian Vettel incident and chose to cut the corner on the inside. Personally, I don't think he had much choice. I don't think there's anything wrong with him cutting the corner. He emerged through that little melee in second position, so he had a net gain out of that. He did very well out of it, if you like. He was lucky, but I think it was nothing more than that. If he'd come out in front of Lewis, I think there'd have been much more pressure for him to give back that position, and rightly so. But what the stewards have to take into consideration here is all the chaos that was happening. On a first lap as well, there's a much more leeway given to driver infractions, if you like. There's much more scope for drivers to go outside of the rules because there's so much happening in such a short and condensed space of time. So I don't think Max had much choice. There were lots of other cars cutting corners, getting out of the way of accidents. You haven't really got a lot of choice, and that particular circuit allowed drivers to do that. But yes, if he'd come out in the front, if he'd come out in the lead of the race having cut that corner, I think he'd have quite rightly been asked to give the position back, and I don't think anybody could have argued with that. Right, that's another long video, I'm sure. I haven't timed it, but I'm sure it's gone on. Thank you again, guys, so much. Really appreciate all of the feedback, all of the comments. The ones I didn't get to in the videos, I'm trying my best to answer as many as I can on the various forums. That's it then for this week's Q&A. Any more questions you want to keep firing in, keep them coming all week. Use hashtag AskElvis, and we'll get on to more next week. So they come thick and fast now. We've got another race this weekend, so we'll start building up to that one tomorrow. But for now, thank you very much. Please do like the video, share it around again, as I say, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the little bell down there somewhere, and you'll never miss another video. It will notify you whenever one goes live. So for now, thank you guys. Thank you very much. Enjoy the sunshine, and I'll see you tomorrow.